I never thought I could look at my own parents and see strangers, but that's exactly what happened the moment they told me that a five-tier cake and a custom-made designer gown were more important than their granddaughter's ability to breathe. Imagine standing in a room filled with $50 worth of imported peonies, listening to your mother discuss the aesthetic necessity of a champagne fountain, while you have a medical bill in your pocket for a life-saving surgery that costs exactly half of what they're spending on a single night of partying. I stood there, watching them flush $250,000 down the drain for my sister's royal wedding, while my daughter, Lily, was fading away in a hospital bed, and they had the audacity to tell me that they simply didn't have the liquid assets to help. Was I wrong for what I did next? Was I the monster for taking the one thing they valued more than family and using it as a bargaining chip to save my child? I want you to listen to everything that happened and tell me if you would have burned those bridges too, or if you would have let your child suffer just to keep the peace in a family that clearly didn't value yours. To understand how we got to that point, you have to understand the dynamic of the Miller family. My parents, Richard and Elena, are old money, or at least they act like it. To them, reputation isn't just important. It's the only currency that matters. I was always the difficult one because I chose a life they didn't script for me. I didn't marry a partner in a law firm. I married Mark, a high school teacher with a heart of gold and a bank account that reflects the reality of public education. We were happy, though. We had our daughter, Lily, and for 5 years, life was perfect. Then came the diagnosis. It started with a persistent cough and ended with a specialist telling us that Lily had a rare congenital heart defect that was rapidly deteriorating. She needed a specialized procedure, one that wasn't fully covered by our insurance, and the deductible and out-of-pocket costs were astronomical. We sold our second car, we took out personal loans, and we worked extra shifts until we were walking ghosts. But we were still $80 short of the deposit required for the surgical center. While my world was collapsing, my younger sister, Chloe, was living in a literal fairy tale. Chloe has always been the golden child, the one who followed the script. She got engaged to a man named Bradley, whose family owns half the real estate in the county. My parents were ecstatic. This wasn't just a wedding to them, it was a merger. They announced they were putting up $250,000 to ensure the event was the social highlight of the decade. I remember the Sunday brunch where they announced the budget. I sat there, my hands shaking as I thought about Lily's oxygen tank at home, and I finally swallowed my pride. I asked them. I didn't ask for a gift. I asked for a loan. I told my father, "Dad, Lily needs this surgery within the next 3 months. We are short. If you could just pivot a small fraction of the wedding budget toward her medical fund, we will pay you back every cent with interest for the rest of our lives." My mother didn't even look up from her bridal magazine. She just sighed and said, "Maya, we've already signed the contracts with the Pierre Hotel and the florist. It's a matter of honor. We can't just scale back Chloe's special day because you and Mark didn't plan for emergencies. It's tragic about Lily, truly, but Chloe only gets married once." The coldness of that statement broke something inside me. For the next month, I watched through social media as Chloe posted about her $15,000 dress fittings, and my parents hosted lavish engagement parties that cost more than my annual salary. Every time I tried to bring it up, I was shut down. I was told I was being bitter and trying to rain on Chloe's parade. My sister even had the nerve to tell me that maybe if I prayed harder, the money would manifest, but that she couldn't possibly ask Mom and Dad to cut the open bar to save her niece. The resentment began to boil, a slow, dark heat that consumed every waking moment. I was watching my daughter get weaker, her lips tinged blue while she played with her dolls, while my family was arguing over whether the napkins should be eggshell or ivory. Then the universe handed me a hand of cards I never expected to play. My grandfather, my mother's father, had passed away years ago. He was a quiet, eccentric man who had a very complicated relationship with my mother. He had left behind a sprawling piece of estate land, an old, undeveloped coastal plot that everyone assumed was tied up in a perpetual trust that my mother managed. However, because I was the only one who actually visited him in the nursing home during his final years, he had left me a specific, overlooked legal interest in that property. I didn't think it was worth anything until a major luxury developer reached out to me. It turns out, my mother and the groom's family had been planning to use a specific portion of that estate as the venue for the wedding of the century. They had already spent 6 figures on landscaping, custom, built pavilions, and temporary infrastructure on that land. They assumed, because my mother was the executor, that they had full rights to it. But they hadn't checked the fine print of the updated deed my grandfather signed 6 months before he died. I held the legal title to the very ground the wedding was supposed to happen on. Not only that, but the developer informed me that the access road they were building, which was essential for the catering trucks and the 400 guests, crossed directly through a parcel that was exclusively mine. Without my signature, the entire $250,000 production was a legal trespass. They had built a kingdom on my sand, and they hadn't even bothered to ask for the keys. So here is where I stood. I had a daughter who was dying because her grandparents preferred a party over her life. And I had a legal document that could shut down that entire party with a single phone call to the sheriff. My lawyer told me I could file an injunction tomorrow. It would halt all construction, cancel the venue, and leave my parents and Chloe liable for hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost deposits and breach of contract fees with their vendors. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I had the power to ruin the most important day of their lives, the very thing they chose over my daughter's heart. Before I tell you what happened next and how I used that leverage, I want you to pause. Go down to the comments right now and tell me, what would you have done? Would you have played nice and hoped for a miracle? Or would you have played dirty to save your child? I didn't hesitate. I didn't go to them with a plea this time. I went to them with a contract. I walked into my parents' home during a high-stakes planning meeting with the wedding coordinator. I laid the deed and the surveyor's map on the mahogany table, right on top of the samples for the silk invitations. The room went dead silent. I told them, you have 24 hours to wire $100,000 into Lily's medical trust. If the money isn't there by noon tomorrow, I am filing a cease and desist. I will fence off the access road. I will have the police escort your decorators off my land. There will be no wedding on the coast. There will be no grand entrance. There will be a construction lien and a very public scandal that Bradley's family will never forgive. My mother's face went from pale to a deep, ugly purple. She called me a vulture and an extortionist. Chloe burst into tears, screaming that I was ruining her life because I was jealous of her happiness. My father tried to bluster, threatening to disinherit me. I just looked him in the eye and said, "You already disinherited me when you decided a champagne fountain was worth more than Lily's life. You have 20 hours left." The next day was the longest of my life. I sat by Lily's bed, watching the clock. At 11:55 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. The wire transfer had cleared, $100,000, It was more than I had asked for, likely a shut up and go away payment to ensure I didn't interfere with the rest of the wedding. I immediately called the surgeon's office and scheduled the procedure. But the story didn't end with a thank you. The wedding went on, but the atmosphere was poisoned. I wasn't invited, obviously. Neither was Mark or Lily. My parents told everyone in their social circle that I was a deeply troubled person who had stolen from the family, leaving out the part where the money went toward keeping a 5-year-old alive. They spent the rest of the wedding budget trying to pretend the scandal didn't exist, but the groom's family, the wealthy real estate moguls, found out about the legal mess. They were horrified, not by me, but by my parents' lack of due diligence and their willingness to let a legal flaw jeopardize the event. The marriage started under a cloud of tension and distrust. 3 months later, Lily had her surgery. It was a complete success. Seeing her run through the park, her cheeks pink for the first time in years, was worth every ounce of hatred my family threw my way. I haven't spoken to my parents or Chloe since the day the wire cleared. They sent a Christmas card that was essentially a bill for emotional damages, which I promptly burned. I lost my birth family that year, but I saved my daughter. I learned that blood doesn't make you family, sacrifice does. My parents were willing to sacrifice a child for a show. I was willing to sacrifice a show for a child. I don't regret it for a second. The moral of this story is that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who will fail you the hardest when the stakes are high. Never be afraid to use whatever power you have to protect the people who truly matter, even if it means burning down the bridges that lead back to a toxic home. If I had stayed polite, I might be visiting a grave right now instead of watching my daughter grow up. Like this video if you were on my side and think I did the right thing. Subscribe for more stories like this where the underdog finally gets the upper hand, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far, or did I not go far enough? I'll see you all in the next story.